we went through Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley's years, and we came up with over-unders for what we thought were their most important stats, right? And Jeff picked his over and unders for these particular numbers. I did not, so I figured today I can present those numbers to the two of you, and we can go through them and pick over and under based on how we think the season's going to go. And, of course, we'll do this in the context of discussing exactly what we think the Giants' offense is going to look like, which is still somewhat of a mystery since we still, unfortunately, have not seen this offense on the field yet, since none of the players have been to the facility since last January when none of these new coaches were even hired yet.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it'll be an interesting exercise. All right, let's start with Daniel Jones. Paul, I will let you select the statistical category we can start with for Mr. Jones.
Well, you probably would like to go yardage first. I have no problem there.
Okay, let's go yardage first. That's fine. Then we'll go completion percentage. Yardage first. Jeff and I said his over-under for yardage at 3,950. 3,950. Paul, you can lead us off here.
I'm going to go under. I could see him going somewhere in the vicinity of 3,700. I don't think he's going to tickle 4,000, as you guys might have suggested. I do think there'll be a lot more runs, and there'll be a lot more short passes, and hopefully even some more long passes to Saquon Barkley, which we really never got to see last year. We thought we would, but we really didn't see them. But nonetheless, I just think that the Giants are going to try to play more ball control, try to eat up some clock, not necessarily have quick scores. I'm going to say that the number is going to be closer to 3,700.
Lance, your thoughts?
I would agree with Paul. I'm going to go under as well. I think that they're going to look to set the tone on the ground initially as Daniel Jones gets more comfortable with this offense. You also have to look at the fact that last year, and I understand it's a completely different offense, he had 3,027 yards, 13 games, okay, really 12 because he got in late time in that first Dallas game.
And Lance, by the way, we did the numbers on that. That's 252 yards per game, and that would have averaged out to 4,036 for the season.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so, that provides further context. And once again, I don't think it's crazy to think that, he can't get up to about 3,600 or 3,700 when you tack on 4 full more games, maybe even more, maybe even 3,800. But I don't see him getting the over. I think it's much more likely that he gets the under. And as great as Dallas's passing game was, keep in mind, Dak Prescott only had one season where he had more than 3,900 passing yards. And he's been fairly consistent in his 4 years as that quarterback. So that, to me, is another reason why I think it's safe to say he'll finish under.
Lance, to me, the easiest way for Jones to go over that number is if the Giants are not only trailing an awful lot during the course of the season, but that, he is forced to go to the passing game a lot quicker and abandon the run, earlier in games. And I don't think the Giants really want to do that.
Paul, and I think you hit it on the head. And that's why I'm going to go over here. And Jeff also went over, by the way, just FYI. I think that, to your point, I think if this season goes the way the Giants want it to, this will be under.
Yes.
I think it's their intentions to be a run-heavy team and not have to throw the ball 40 times a game. But I don't know if this defense will allow them to play that way as much as they want. So I think they're going to be forced to throw the ball a lot in second halves of some of these games just to keep pace with opposing offenses. So that's why I'm going to go over here, not because of the way the Giants want to play, but because game flow will dictate it. And I think this is going to be close. I could see him coming up short of 4,000, even finish with like 3,980. And just for the record here, I'll give you some of the numbers from last year. Last year in the NFL, there were 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 players, 12 quarterbacks that finished with more than 3,950 yards. Winston, Prescott, Goff, Rivers, Ryan, Wilson, Brady, Carr, Wentz, Mahomes, Rodgers, Garoppolo. And if Garoppolo can throw for more than 3,950 yards, I think Daniel Jones can too. So I'm going to go over for that reason.
Well, you remember, John, Eli threw for over 4,000 yards for half of the seasons in his career.
Right.
So you're not really reaching to suggest that they may have to do that. But I would definitely agree, as stated before, if everything goes according to their plan, he won't have to. But it is absolutely possible.
Well, and here's the other thing. You brought up, in all likelihood, the Giants may be playing a lot of catch-up this season because of the unknown with their defense. Daniel Jones was already doing that this past season as a rookie. I mean, I just did the math real quickly. On average, he attempted 38 passes per game last season.
That's too many.
Look at the fact that he had 459 attempts and through 12 starts, I mean, that's nearly 40. So even if you look at that trajectory from last season, I could still see him attempting 38, 39 passes a game, but he still could very well finish just under 3,900. So I agree with John. I think it's going to come close, but I'm still comfortable in saying it's going to be slightly under that.
All right, let's go to completion percentage because this points to efficiency, right, in the passing game, which I think is an important number. We set the over-under here. We had it at 64 flat. Then we decided maybe that was a little bit high, so we put it at 63.5 for the year for him. 63.5. We should point out that last year, Daniel Jones finished the season with a 61.9% completion percentage. Lance, let's start with you here.
Wow, this is a tough one because, this could really go in a variety of ways. I think a lot obviously has to do with the success of the running game, pass protection, so many different influences with respect to this. I will go with slightly under again, and I'll say probably I could see him finishing at like 62.9 if you want to be exact. I think it's going to come very close.
That is very exact.
Yeah. Because I just feel this is going to be one of those seasons where you can't overlook the fact that he's learning a new offense again, and there could be a learning curve and some ups and downs early. And also remember, limited on field work, having time to work with the receivers, some of the tight ends, building that chemistry. I'm taking all of that into consideration. I get it. A bulk of the nucleus he worked with last season. But then again, these guys are going to be running different routes this season because it's a completely new scheme. So that's why I'm going to say slightly under as a result of all of that.
Well, a lot of the passes he throws are going to wind up being short to medium range, I think, to Barkley and to Engram. And if you go back and look what the Cowboys did with Romo when Garrett was there, Romo was over 65% in each of those seasons. So I'm going to say that he's going to be. That is Daniel Jones at 65 to 66%. I'm going to take the over here.
I'm going to go under, but I'm with Lance. This, to me, is going to be so close. I think he's going to be somewhere between 63.5 and 64.5. I think that's where he's going to land this year when it comes to completion percentage. It's going to be really, really tight. And I go both ways here because Garrett's offense is going to be a more vertical offense, right? Which means more, downfield throws. Traditionally, there were fewer, Paul, and you know what I mean by this schemed up, guaranteed, easy throws using rub routes and stuff like that. So there'll be fewer of those, but I also think you'll get some higher percentage throws like slants and short passes over the middle, which the Cowboys used a lot with Jason Witten and, running slants to Des Bryant. I mean, you remember all these Cowboys-Giant games. They would run that slant to death against the Giants, and that's a high percentage throw. So I see this going both ways. I really do, but I will land with Lance. I think there's a better chance of it being under than over, but it would not surprise me either way.
John, I think the part about your thoughts there that kind of rankle me a bit is the thinking that Garrett threw so many longer passes when he was calling the plays in Dallas and that he would like to do it here. I don't think he's got the personnel to do it here right now. Until the Giants prove that they've got one of those kinds of guys.
I mean, Slane has the speed to win deep, no?
Consistently?
He ran high 4.3s, right?
Look, it comes down to me, for me, if the Giants find out that either Slayton progresses to the next level and becomes one of those guys who can make large radius catches and 50-50 catches on a consistent basis, 17 and 18 yards downfield, absolutely positively. I'll tell you right now, if Toomer or if Burris or if Nix were on this team, I would say you're 1,000% on board. I'm with you. Daniel Jones is going to throw a ton of passes downfield, and it's going to be that way. I don't see it right now. I'm still missing that component in that wide receiver room to make me believe.
Well, the thing is, when you do look at the personnel right now, I think a big piece of the strength is Yak. yardage after the catch in terms of what Sterling Shepard, Golden Tate especially based on his track record in the NFL, and then Barkley if you use him as a receiver. So I'm with you there, Paul. I mean, I certainly think it's a fair point if you look on paper, but I don't think that means that Jason Garrett is just going to settle and say, well, we may not have all the speedsters right now on the team, so we're going to become predictable and just keep everything within that short yardage distance. I think he's still going to take his chances down the field. I also think another target, guys, down the field is Evan Engram. I think if he could stay healthy, I don't see why you can't have him go vertical with his route running. That's another weapon in addition to Slayton. Remember, Blake Jarwin was a guy, sometimes they would move down the field in Dallas, and they would see whether or not he could cut up the defense down the field. So that's another person that's not necessarily a receiver that I think could be a component of the vertical attack this season.
That would be nice. Keep him on the field first.
All right, let's go. Let's go to touchdowns here, guys. Jeff and I set this one at 30.5. 30.5. Last year, just so everybody understands it, Daniel Jones for the Giants, again, he only played in 12 games. He played in 13, but that was only a couple plays at the end, so we're not counting that. He threw 24, which is a real simple math problem there. That's 2 per game. I'm going to go over here. I'll lead us off. To my point earlier, I think he's going to accumulate yards. I think he's going to accumulate touchdown passes. I think he will get the ball in the end zone enough. I think this offense will be productive. I think Daniel Jones will be a big part of that. So I'm going to go over 30.5. Paul?
Well, Eli Manning only hit 30 touchdown passes 3 times.
Different era of football, though.
Career.
You know that.
Understood. But Kevin Gilbride was one who really did like to throw it downfield and go for the big play and throw it into the end zone. I got Daniel Jones at 28. I think he's going to be in the upper 20s, but I do not think he will touch 30.
I think this is another one that's very close, similar to completion percentage. I'll lean towards over, and it's not necessarily about the offense. It's about the necessity of what the team is going to have to do, to
Bingo.
John's point on offense. And I just feel even if they're not playing catch-up, guys, okay, it's more of a matter of if these games are going to be high scoring, and the Giants, you assume, are going to be in a lot of shootouts this season because maybe they don't necessarily stop a lot of teams, but in order to stay within the hunt, they're going to continually go up and down the field. I think out of necessity, Daniel Jones will be faced with opportunities to get just slightly over 30. So this is more of a necessity number that I'm going to go with as opposed to the style and tempo of the offense.
I don't think they want him to be over 30 because I think if they can get inside the 7 or even the 6-yard line, 5-yard line, they're going to want to force it in. That's what Colombo and Garrett are going to want to do. They're not going to go spread offense at the 2-yard line, I don't think, and send 5 guys into the end zone and make him throw it in there. God willing, they'll just smash mouth it in and shove it down somebody's throat.
And by the way, that's passing touchdowns. That's not rushing and throwing combined. Just so everyone's on the same page, because I think that'd be an easy over if you're including rushing touchdowns.
And the way they've invested in the line, too. I mean, my goodness, if they're not pounding it in and getting rushing touchdowns inside the 5-yard line, something is very wrong.
All right, let's go to the 2 ones that might be the most important, guys. You saved them for last. Lance, do you want to do fumbles or interceptions first?
Oh, boy. You really had to go there.
Paul, it's a huge key to the season.
Let's go with fumbles first.
All right, Lance, we set the over-under for fumbles at 12.5. 12.5. Now, last year, it has been well documented that Daniel Jones led the league in fumbles. I think the final number was 28, right? I don't have it right in front of me.
Well, no, he had 18 and he lost 11.
He had 18. Lost. Okay, that's right.
Yeah.
18 and lost 11. So we set it this year at 12.5. Yeah, I was thinking of total turnovers, or I'm sorry. So
well, but here's the thing, though. I need a clarification. Is 12.5 the amount of times he fumbles or the amount of times he loses the fumble?
I do not care about fumbles lost because that is out of the quarterback's control. I'm talking about total number of fumbles, whether they are recovered by the Giants or not.
Well, I will say this. If the Giants want to turn a number of close games into W's as opposed to L's, they better hope that number is below 12.5. So... But then again, this is not necessarily hope, because hope is not a way you win football games. It's more of how things are going to play out. I do think with the Giants addressing the offensive line, getting younger, that hopefully is encouraging for better pass protection, and hopefully the improvement to the rushing attack consistency will also prevent Daniel Jones from seeing more pressure. So if 18 was the number last year, is it crazy to think that he could get that down to 11 or 10, let's say.
Now, remember,
No.
that
So
18 was in 12 games. So you're looking at 1.5 per game. To get under 12.5, that rate has to be cut literally in half, and it's not surprised that I set the number here, to 0.75 per game. So he would literally have to cut his fumble rate in half to beat this number.
Well, the more and more you break it down with the analytics and the mathematics makes me think even more. So you know what? I will go slightly over. I do think the number is going to come down, but that may be asking a lot to go completely in half. I could see the total being more in that 13 to 14 barometer this season.
I'm going to go under here. I think fumbles can be fixed, even if you do get pressured a lot. I think Daniel Jones probably spent this entire offseason working on ball control more than anything else. I'm not saying he's going to have 6. He might have 12 on the dot or 11, but I think he will reduce it enough where it will be under 12.5. Paul?
I think it's going to be under. In fact, I'm going to say 9.5 would have been a really strange number for me to deal with because I think it's going to fall right between the 9 and 10 area. I do think he's going to be a lot better with processing, so he'll be quicker getting rid of the ball.
And by the way, that is key to this whole thing, by the way.
No question. And I also believe the line will be better, okay? And then on top of that, as I say, I really believe that the Giants are going to drop back their quarterback a lot less this year. That's the plan. Whether or not they're allowed to do that because of having to climb uphill on the scoreboard is another story. But I'm going to say, for argument's sake, they'll be effective in running the kind of game plan they want to. Therefore, he'll be dropping back less. The number's going to be probably 9 or 10. I go under.
All right, and then interceptions. This is the other one. Jeff and I kind of wrangled with this number a little bit. We struggled with where we were going to put it. We landed on 13.5. Last year, there were 7 quarterbacks that finished with more than 13.5 interceptions. Jameis Winston, obviously, Baker Mayfield, Phillip Rivers, Jared Goff, Kyle Allen, Matt Ryan, Andy Dalton, finishing with 13 on the dot. Jimmy Garoppolo, Ryan Fitzpatrick, Sam Darnold, and Deshaun Watson, and Kyler Murray, just for the record, finished with 12, which is exactly where Daniel Jones landed in interceptions last year with 12. Paul, why don't you lead us off on this one?
Well, I said 28 touchdown passes, and I'm figuring that he's going to go somewhere in the vicinity of 28-12, 28-13. So your 13.5 number is really giving me a stomach ache.
Oh, good. That's what I like to do. I love giving Paul stomach aches.
Yeah, especially at lunchtime. So I'm going to say he will slightly come in under and have 13 picks.
Lance, what do you think?
Well, remember, he also had those 12 interceptions in those 12 games. So you have to take into consideration now you're going to give him 4 more games, more passing opportunities, more chances for the defense to capitalize. I'm going to go slightly over. I could see it being more in that 31-14 total, 31 touchdowns, 14 interceptions.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's going to have a better than a 2-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio, which is what you're looking for. I said over 30 touchdowns, but to my point, I think he's going to get put in a lot of comeback situations. And Paul, you know how it goes at the end of these games. You got to force balls sometimes.
I know.
So I think he might run into some trouble with some of those. So I think he'll finish with Lance. I agree. I think he's going to be somewhere around like 32 touchdowns, 14 picks. So I'm going to go slightly over on that one.
And that's very fair because, look, if the Giants season doesn't go as they would like it to go and they cannot use the game plans that they'd like to use each and every week and they're forced to just start chucking it and trying to play pinball football, then a number of these things that you've talked about, John, are clearly going to go over for him.
Now, Paul, here's my question, and we didn't actually address this with a number, but I'm just going to throw it out to you guys for fun. If the Giants want to win this year, how many total fumbles and interceptions must Jones get below for the Giants to be successful this year? Has that to be under 20?
Well, but define successful, though, to me, John.
500, 7 wins, somewhere around there. Okay,
Well,
put it this way. For them not to be put in a hole, Lance, where they have to make up for turnovers, which can be really, really hard.
Well, I think I've thrown these numbers out because I've looked at them so closely over the last few months. 33 giveaways last season. Daniel Jones was responsible for 23 of them because he had 11 lost fumbles and 12 interceptions. So my answer to you would be, clearly they've got to get it down from 33 as a team. But in fairness, Jones was responsible for the bulk of them. Now, the factors and environment around him influences him.
And by the way, quarterbacks for all teams are responsible for turnovers more than any other player. That's just the way it works.
Well, the ball is always in their hands on every single play, so there's no doubt about that. So if you're looking at 23 as the total from last year and you see how it was a minus 17 turnover differential, I would say Daniel Jones's total for the Giants to have success, you want to be in that 16 to 17 territory this season. That's where I would say he has to target in his head.
All right. I hear Paul heavily sighing as he contemplates the number here. I will go ahead. I'm sorry. No, please. I was just going to say under 20. Look, I think for it not to completely hamstring the team, I think his number's got to be under 20. Combined fumbles lost and interceptions. And if you talk about fumbles total, even take the fumbles lost out of it, I think he's got to be around 20 for fumbles, total fumbles and interceptions for the team not to be seriously hamstrung by too many mistakes from that position.
See, to me, there are too many other factors that are involved here. We're talking about, I would say my inclination is to go that the fumbles lost and the picks have to total 20 or less. That's my inclination. But let's understand that, Eli, on a number of his years, was victimized by a horrific number of drop passes, which, quite frankly, third down drop passes are almost as bad as turnovers.
Well, and you have bad luck. Balls get knocked up at the
have
air,
bad luck.
tipped at the line, all that
sure
sort
you
of
do.
stuff.
You have a lot of those things. So, to be honest, there were years, and we've discussed this how many times on this show, where Eli actually played well. His numbers were good. His production was good, but the rest of the team let him down, and they had a terrible record. So his touchdown to interception ratio plus touchdown to fumble ratio did not really equate to wins and losses. So I have a hard time with the question because I don't necessarily think that the mechanics kind of even up. So I'm going to go, it's got to be under 20, but I do have a problem with the actual mechanics of the equation.
Fair enough. Let's try to get to these Barkley over-unders, guys, before we say goodbye, okay? Rushing yards, guys. Again, we did our Daniel Jones over-unders to start the show. Here are the ones that Jeff and I came up on Tuesday's show for Saquon Barkley. We'll put his rushing yards at 1,450. 1,450. Gentlemen, we'll start with you, Lance. Over or under?
I'm going to go under here. I do think the Giants are going to try to emphasize the run, but, even if you go back to Saquon's dynamic rookie season, he had 1,300, just over that. 1,307 to be exact. I think there's still a lot of unknown. Remember, there's young offensive linemen. I understand everybody's optimistic, and you hope the offensive line improves, and I get all that. But I also think they're going to try to involve Saquon as a receiver here or there to give that insurance policy to Daniel Jones. So I think he'll have certainly an opportunity if he stays healthy to get over 1,000, get over 1,100, 1,200 I think is doable. Getting over 1,400, that to me I think is pushing it a little too much.
Paul?
You see, this again goes back to, will the Giants be able to execute the plan that they want to or the plan that they're forced to use? If they do what they want to, Barkley will run for 1,500 yards this year, and I will go over. If it goes the other way and they're forced to play catch-up all the time, week in and week out, he will go under.
I'm going to go over here, Paul. And I know maybe this is contrary to my Jones take, but I think they will run it enough. And I don't think this will be much of a timeshare situation, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. I agree with
I think if you go back to what Jason Garrett did in Dallas and you look at Ezekiel Elliott's numbers, I don't see why Saquon can't be in the same neighborhood Zeke has been in over the first few years of his career. So for that reason, I'm going to go over. And for the same reason, and I'll go to the next category here, of a number of carries, I put it at 300 flat. I'm going over. Again, if you look at how the Cowboys use Ezekiel Elliott, he was over 300 every year. I think I think Saquon will be over 300 this year. And if he gets to 300 carries, I think he's definitely getting to 1,450 yards. That's why I'm going over for both. Paul?
I totally concur. And, we had an opportunity, John, to talk to John Kitna on this show. Lance, you talked to him on Sirius. And if you believe anything about what he said, referring to Jason Garrett's offense and Colombo's offensive line, you'd have to pick over on both of these numbers.
Yeah, I'm going to go with you guys. I'm going to go over. I think 300 carries over that is certainly doable. As you pointed out, John, Zeke was the consistent carrier for the Cowboys. Tony Pollard last season barely saw the field as his backup. I think Dion Lewis is more of a change of pace guy, but not a big bruiser that they're going to give a lot of carries to. So there is no threat to Saquon. He stays healthy. There's no reason why he can't get over 300.
All right, let's go to receptions. I put the number at 66. And you know what? So it's not a draw. Let me make it 66 and a half for receptions this year. I'm going to go under. I think there are so many targets here in the passing game. He's not going to be in a position where he gets a billion dump-offs. I think he'll be above 60, but I think he'll be below 66 and a half. Lance, how about you?
Well, Zeke was not a huge receiver in their game, though the last 2 seasons he's had over 70, so they did slowly involve him more and more. But I would lean with you, John. I think it's going to be slightly under. I think they're going to find ways to spread the wealth. And I don't think Saquon's always going to be the primary target. And here's the other thing. If the offensive line improves, which it needs to, and the running game has more success, you're not going to want Saquon Barkley to be that constant dump-off machine, because if he is the constant dump-off machine, that to me means that in all likelihood, the protection is not where it should be.
I agree.
So I don't think you want to see that number over 65, because that means that he's more of an insurance policy as opposed to a true playmaker, or at least the number one option on that play calling sheet.
Paul?
It's funny, John, because the number for me would have been 65. So I guess that actually puts him a shade under what you just said, right?
Yep.
Okay, so I will go under.
All right, and then you go to yards, and I think this is interesting because I do think, and I had this conversation last year with you guys, that I thought he'd get fewer catches than his rookie year, but his yards per catch will be much higher.
Yes.
And I think I probably made this number too high, but I'll go with it anyway. We went with 600 receiving yards on the year for Barkley. If he's going to get under 65 catches, I think it's going to be under 66 and a half. I think it's going to be tough for him to get to 600 receiving yards, so I'm going to go under for this. Paul?
Yeah, I could see him going somewhere between 8 and 9 yards a catch, so I will go under as well. I easily could be somewhere in the vicinity of even 550, but I think 600 is asking a lot.
I think he's going to come close, but I would lean towards under as well, and it goes back to my rationale from my last explanation. If Saquon is going to get high receiving yards, I don't think it's going to be because that is a big part of the game plan. It's more of because, unfortunately, other things are not working the way that they anticipated within the offense. So I think if you want to talk about success and the Giants' offense being consistent, you do not want to see Saquon Barkley in that 700 or higher territory. So therefore, I'll go under.
All right, rushing touchdowns. We put the over-under at 11 and a half. 11 and a half. Lance, let's start with you.
I'm going to go under. I know that Paul brought up the fact that if they're within the 5-yard line, they're going to constantly hand it off to Saquon, but I also would not remove from the dialogue Daniel Jones also trying to throw it and spread the wealth a little bit. So I could see Saquon getting to double digits, but I'll hold off at 10 as opposed to going under.
Paulie?
Isn't it funny you came up with 11 and a half, because Ezekiel Elliott had a 15 and he had a 12, and his other 2 years he was under 10. So I could see Saquon having, let's say, 11 or 12, and you had to go 11 and a half. So I will go 11. I'll say it's under, but, that's a really tenuous number right there.
Yeah, I'm on the fence here. I do think there's a chance the Giants might find a short yardage back at some point. Mm-hmm. And if you're going to take Saquon off the field, he's a guy that dances a little bit, so maybe you don't want him doing the short yardage stuff. So take that consideration. I think Daniel Jones will be used on quarterback sneaks throughout the year in, goal-to-go situations if you're inside the 1.
Yeah.
So put all that together. I could easily see him getting 12 or 13, and that would not surprise me one bit. But I'm with you. I'm going to go under. So maybe I made these last couple too high because we're all going under on these. But, oh well. Receiving touchdowns. I put it at 3.5. 3.5. Lance, why don't we start with you on this one?
Yeah, I'm going to go under again. I could see him actually getting exactly 3. So here's my philosophy. I think, and you brought up the fact that Daniel Jones could have a few rushing touchdowns. That also is why I think Saquon's receiving touchdowns could be limited, because if you look at Dak Prescott, by the way, Dak every single season, and this is right in line with what we're talking about, Dak always finished with more rushing touchdowns than Zeke had receiving touchdowns. So I think that trend is going to continue to play out. I think Daniel Jones has more opportunities for more rushing touchdowns than Saquon has receiving touchdowns. I think 3, I'll go under.
Paul?
Lance, you're making a lot of sense on your argument there, and quite honestly,
I always do, but go ahead.
Oh, okay. I do also think that if Barkley's going to be close to the end zone, he's going to be getting it on running plays, not necessarily throwing it in there. So if he's going to have a receiving touchdown, it's going to have to come from outside, inside the 10. It's going to have to be from a distance. So I will go under as well.
Yeah, and he can turn those screens into touchdowns, though. I mean, it can happen. They might use them on wheel routes. It can happen, but I don't think it'll be common. So I'm going to go under on that as well. And then I did not ask Fiegels this one, but much like the Jones question, I'll put it to you guys. Give me scrimmage yards. How many scrimmage yards do you think Barkley's going to have this year? I have it at 2050. That was my prediction.
Wow.
I'll go 2,200.
Whoa, that's a big one. Okay, so he comes just short of Tiki's record.
Yes.
I'll go 2045.
All right, what are your prices writing me there, Meadow?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm doing.
Come on, man.
Well, wait, you said to be exact, so there you go. I'm giving you my exact number, 2045.
Right, so Paul went 2,200. I went 2050. I did not ask Jeff this, so I'll have to get that answer from another time. And Lance was prices righted me, and he went 2045.